I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this Yamaha Grizzly 660 might need a rebuild. Today we're going to be working on this very smoky 2006 Yamaha Grizzly 660. And yes, this thing is a Trump edition. Obviously not factory. Somebody just slapped that on there. But yeah, 2006, this thing's actually in pretty good shape overall. The owner of this said he bought it a couple years ago, only had 500 miles on it. And I think it's got either 2,500 or 3,500 miles on it now. So he's definitely racked up some miles. Let's check. So yeah, almost 3,500 miles on it. And we got 556 hours. And I don't think it's been super easy miles because he uses this for plowing and work and everything. Probably does trail riding too, I don't know. But I know he does use it for work. And we got to get this thing going again because obviously we get some snow. He wants to do some snow plowing. Now it does run. Let's go ahead and fire it up. It actually sounds good. Start this thing. Starts super easy. And it sounds pretty good. Make sure this thing's in neutral here. But we do have a problem. It might not be super obvious because of the snow, but she does smoke quite a bit. So I can't drive this around too much because we do have a CV axle that has popped out of place here. So I don't know what's going on in there. Hopefully it's just the CV shaft, maybe a bad clip or something. Hopefully it's not the differential. We'll find out when we deal with that. Whew, look at that thing smoke. There's a cloud of it. And that is not from being cold. That right there is burning oil some bad. Oh, wow. Thing runs good somehow. Look at that. Whoa. Nope. Might be running low on gas. It is pretty low. But anyways, before we, burn up too much oil, let's get this thing in the garage and see what's going on with it. Yeah, she... does run and drive though. Getting a little hazy in here. I think I'm gonna shut her down. Whew. Look at the cloud of smoke that Grizzly produced. I'm gonna go get some fresh air and let this air out for a bit. All right, well, I made it back in here and the smoke has cleared up now, so we can get to work on this thing. First thing I wanna do, I want to check. It definitely smells like oil, but I'm going to make sure we don't have any coolant that's leaking out as well. So we're going to pull this front rack off. Unfortunately, kind of a bad design. There should be a panel. I mean, you're going to pull this panel off right here. There should be a panel you can take off without pulling the whole rack off to check your radiator, but there's not. Now, I mean, down here you can sneak in there. I know it's dark, but you can sneak in there to check it if you want, but then you might bend your plastics or whatnot. And we're going to have to refill it anyways after the top end job, so I'm going to pull this rack off. It's really not all that difficult. It's just we got 4 12mm bolts holding the rack to the frame. We're going to pop these little plastic pieces out right there so we can access those rack bolts. Same thing on this side. Come over here, just pop that off. So we just got a bolt there. One here. And one there. That one was stuck in there. Then we just got 2 bolts, 10mm underneath here, holding the plastic to the rack right there, and one over here. And of course that one broke. So now this will pop off here. He does have a light on there, so that doesn't look like it unplugs. He's got it. Looks like it's taped up. Doesn't look like it's taped up well, so I think we'll just unplug that and then redo it for him. They do have plugs in here, just buried under the electrical tape. So that's good. We can unplug that. Red on red, black on black. Beautiful. That can come off. Then there's just a couple of plastic push pins in here. That's that. And this can just pop right off. Just like that. Now we can access our radiator. We certainly wouldn't want to open this if the engine was hot, but it's plenty cooled down now. It's been sitting a while. So we'll pop that open, and our coolant is right up to the top, so that's a good sign. So we weren't losing any coolant. Next thing I wanted to check is the engine oil. We'll pop this cover off here. Pull out our dipstick, wipe it off, and now we insert this, and that's it. We don't screw it in there, we pull it straight out, and as you can see, it looks to be about perfect level. So that looks good. So the oil's good, the coolant's good, all that looks good, so we just gotta start tearing into it now. Just wanted to be sure. I mean, we were tearing into it anyways, but I wanted to see, you know, whether we're losing coolant. Do we have a bad head gasket, bad cylinder head, anything like that? It doesn't appear so, but we'll find out when we get in there. Pop those side panels off. The fuel tank. Pull the fuel tank cover off first. Remove the fuel gauge wire. So we got 2 bolts in the back holding the tank and 2 up front. The 2 up front are through these holes, and they can be accessed with an impact, or if you go in the bottom, you can get them with a wrench or something. This is way easier though. Those in our bag. We're going to make sure our fuel is shut off, that's straight over, and then we can come in here with a screwdriver and loosen that screw up that's in there. And then you can pull this right out. You can kind of sneak it in there when you're pulling the gas tank out, then you risk the chance of breaking this, and it's just a little harder to get out. You know, without removing this. So we got some major fuel leaking around this thing, so we're going to go ahead and fix that while it's all apart. Pull that fuel line off. Now we can pop this tank out of there. Just like that. We'll suck out all this crap. Just like to take a look at how the wiring was run. Usually it's pretty obvious, but sometimes, you know, it doesn't hurt to just take a second and either take a picture or, like I'm doing right now, taking a video. That way we know where everything goes. We can just pop it on out of there. It looks like there was some more junk in there, but that's alright. We'll blow the engine off anyways. One wire under there. There we go. Now we can pop that out of there. Now that popped off the temp sensor right here for the coolant, so we'll remember that, but we'll get that out of the way. We'll come in here, blow all the dirt and stuff off. This engine actually looks pretty clean, but these little Allen heads, if you get a machine that's been running mud a lot, they'll plug up and then they get hard to remove unless you clean them out. So I try to do it with the blowgun the best I can. I'm gonna pop this cover off right here. Now I can access my coolant a little easier. Then I'm going to go ahead and start draining the coolant. A little bit of a messy job. Rinse that off the plastic. Remove the air box right now. Just pull the lid off. Certainly use a new filter. Whoops. Next, I'll go ahead and pull the carburetor off. Start with the choke. Slide that out. Now there's not much tension on the spring and we don't want to lose the plunger, so we could take it all apart, or what I like to do, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know I do this every time. Pull the choke in, and what that does is it just puts quite a bit of pressure on there so you're less likely to lose anything. Then we'll sneak that out of the way. And down here we can loosen this clamp up. Slide that carburetor sideways. Pull these 3 screws off. This is our throttle plate. Now we'll remove that cover. Now we can pull this throttle back and remove that. And we don't want to lose that brass piece right there. And we can just unscrew the throttle cable on carburetor side, and this just pulls right on through. Oh, that's usually not supposed to come out right there. That's usually stuck in there, but it came out, so we'll screw that back on here. I can pop this carburetor off. Now to do a quick top end job, you don't actually have to remove the carburetor. You can just loosen the clamp, pull it over, set it over to the side, but this thing's leaking gas badly. It looks like on the outside, and it floods out onto the bottom. So I think we need a new needle and seat, and it looks like we need a new gasket on the bowl as well. So that's why we're taking it completely off. Come down here, pull the coolant hose, and if we didn't drain the coolant out, we would be making a big mess right here right now. Still got a little spillage. Shove a rag in so we don't get any debris in the engine. And we'll find out how the exhaust comes off here. There we go. That was a clamp that squeezes the head pipe to the muffler, and now we're going to remove the mount. Nice. this once again. Nothing broke. So now you can see it's loosened up. Now we gotta take the 4 bolts off the head, or studs. This I cannot sneak my impact in, so it's done by a ratchet. A little bit of a slow process, and let's hope they all come out. 1 down. 3 more to go. You can tell how dry they are. 2 down. All right, 1 to go. All right, there's the last one. Now we should be able to pop this off. Sneak it on out of here. Pop that sheet shield out. Might make things easier. Yes. There we go. First thing I'm gonna do is remove this oil line that goes from here and it feeds up into the top end of the engine. So get a 17 millimeter down here. And 12 on top. Can loosen that up. We don't want to lose any of our copper washers there. So we got 1 on this side. And then there's 1 on the bottom of that. And there's a bolt that mounts that to the front. Pull that out. Just like that. Now loosen up the valve cover. This is going to be our intake valve. As you can see, these Grizzly 660s have 3, it's a 5 valve engine. They have 3 intake, 2 exhaust. Come over here and loosen up these exhaust valves. The valve cover anyways. Now the reason I like to take off both valve covers, now the intake you have to because you have bolts right here that are holding the head cover on, but the exhaust you don't. But what I like to do is I like to put this on, before I tear it down, I like to put it on top dead center and make sure, you know, we don't have anything going wrong with the valves. Make sure we have play in the valves, all that. The way it was running, I'm guessing it does, because it was running pretty good, other than, you know, burning a lot of oil. So we got to remove this recoil. Pull that out of there. Definitely seeing a little weather. Now this is our inspection port right here, so we want to kind of clean that off a little bit. Loosen that up. I still got a spark plug in this thing, don't I? Go ahead and remove the spark plug. It's way down in there on these things. That plug pulled out. Definitely oily. Pretty filthy looking plug. Whoa, what's that? That right there, that goes in the spark plug cap. So that was loose or busted. We might need a new cap. See that? That should click right in and not be able to remove that easily. So this thing's pretty worn out. We'll put another one on. Surprised that thing was running so good. And I'm surprised, especially with all that oil in the plug. I don't know if you can see it, but the gap on that thing is not much. I don't think that's factory gap. Anyways, we'll put a new plug in there and cap. All right, back at it. So we're gonna rotate this engine over the way it runs, which is, if you're going this way, it's counterclockwise on this. So this way. And we're gonna wait until we see the intake valves drop down, and then they're gonna pop back up right there. All right, so we're gonna keep rotating until we see our marks. That's the first set of marks. That's not what we're going off, even though it's very close, because our mark is right there. I want to line that up with that notch right there. And now we should be on top dead center. So I'm just going to check these valves. Feel pretty good. I mean, I didn't take a feeler gauge to them, but there's play in them. Exhaust. Yeah, feel a little bit looser than the intake, so that should be all good. You can just go ahead and unbutton everything now. First thing I'm going to do is pop this timing chain tensioner off. Beautiful. Now we can go ahead and buzz off all these head cover bolts. I want to keep track of the ones that have the copper washers, such as that one, and the one right in front of it. I believe those are the only two that do, but when you're reassembling this, always refer back to your service manual. I mean, I've done a lot of these engines, the 660s, and I still look at the service manual every time I start assembling again, because I don't specialize on Grizzly 660 engines, you know. I work on many different engines with many different specs, so it's always good to check your own service manual whenever you're reassembling anything, especially engine related components. I mean, some stuff doesn't matter too much with torque specs, but the engine certainly does. So we have all the bolts out. Now there's one that used to always get me, and it's right here. Now if you have the engine pulled on a workbench, it's very easy to see all these bolts on top, but right here it's a little hard because it's on an angle, your frame's right here. But one bolt that usually got me was that one right there, tucked in there. That one was always, I always missed it. And then I start prying a little bit, and I wonder why it's not coming. These come up, they stick a little bit because there's no gasket on here. It's they use Yamaha bond to put this together, so they do stick a little bit coming up, but it shouldn't come off too hard. Definitely a little nervous to see what's going on in the top end of this, especially the Grizzlies. So with as much oil as this thing's burning, you know, if they ran it low on oil, that would not be good. The owner said he didn't, but they all say they don't. Hopefully he didn't, because if he did run it low on oil, the first thing that gets taken out on these is the top end. And what I mean by that is the cam, the cylinder head, and the top head cover, because there's no bushings, there's no bearings. The cam rides on the journals inside the cylinder head, and it's aluminum, so you start taking away oil, and the first thing that it's going to do, that cam's going to eat up that aluminum material, and then it gets very costly. Certainly don't want to jinx anything, so we're going to say hopefully he kept oil in this, and it should be good. There we go. So it definitely took a little force, but it popped up. Whatever you do, you don't want to take a pry bar and put it inside here. That'll damage your mating surface. And boy, have I took apart a bunch of engines that people have done that. It's a little hard to seal them up afterwards. So, a little bit of wiggling, and the moment of truth. Oh man, those journals look beautiful. how smooth, shiny, polished up they are. The cam looks good. Yep, that is in good shape. Nice. So we can double check, make sure we were on top dead center. You can see the cam. There's a little dot right there. And if we come back here, there's a little dot right there. So far we're looking good because we didn't account for if this thing had cylinder head problems. What we did, we went ahead and ordered, on the customer's request, we ordered a OEM cylinder that's been bored out and a shindy piston kit along with the rings and the wrist pin and a top end gasket set. So we should be good to go. And then, you know, of course I'm going to do the valve seals and everything. Hopefully the valves themselves are good, but we won't know until we tear it apart. There's definitely tests we could have done ahead of time while this thing was here, like a compression test, a leak down test, to see what might have been going on without tearing into it. But the owner didn't really want to wait. He just wanted to order the parts. That way when this thing got here, I could work on it. And so here we are. Brand new cylinder, piston. That's going to go in this thing. Hopefully this one is bad, I guess. I don't know. Because the new stuff's going in there anyways, I think. I don't know. We'll see what it is. Something's going on. It's definitely burning oil bad. Most likely, I'm guessing it's the rings, but we'll see. Valve seals possibly. If we can pull that time and chain guide up a little bit, it's going to give us a little more play. Should be able to pull the chain up without removing the sprocket itself. Some machines you have a hard time without removing the sprocket, but as you can see, we just did it. So I'm going to pop that cam out. A little oily, but like I said, this thing's in very good shape. You should see some of the stuff I've pulled out before. Finished pulling out that guide. Now we'll start removing the cylinder head bolt. Before we forget, we'll go ahead and remove this coolant hose. So we get the little guy first. We got a cylinder head bolt underneath the head right here in the back, and then one up front as well. I like to remove these first because they're, well, a little harder to get to. And then, yes, there's that one right there on the front of the cylinder. That removed. Alright, now we're going to pop these 4 head bolts off the top, and then we should be able to pick that right up. Go ahead and grab these, make sure, grab our washers with them. I'm just going to come in here on the fin a little bit and just pry up. Felt a crack a little bit, I think. It did, but it is stuck on there. Yeah. I don't think this engine's ever been apart. She's coming. Gotta be patient. Alright, curious to see what we're gonna find. Lots of oil on the top end. Our cylinder, we'll go ahead and pull these 2 off first. Pull that out of there. We're left with 4 cylinder bolts. These look like 14s. Those are on there in good shape. These have washers as well. Go ahead, crack that open. All right, let's go ahead and lift her up and see what we're working with. Oh yeah, that piston's definitely scored. Wow. And the cylinder super scored. Yeah. So I guess we made the right choice by ordering those parts. I'm gonna go ahead and pull that clip off right now for the wrist pin. And then hopefully there's no damage to the upper part of that connecting rod. I'll try to push this through by hand. All right. I think I got it out of the way. Close one. Yeah. Definitely some scarring on that wrist pin right there. The lower part of this connecting rod, very smooth. No up and down play. We got a little side to side play, but that's normal. But there's no up and down play. But it definitely got a little warm up here. It feels smooth, but you can see a little roughness, but I don't. But I think we'll be good for a long time using that. But yeah, definitely no getting around that. Look at the scarring on the side of that piston skirt. Right there and there. And then right there. There and there. Boy, that is a little strange. Almost seems like it ran out of oil, where it got super, super hot and expanded enough to do that in one side there. Definitely some grooves you can pick up with your finger in there, but certainly could be bored to the next size. To be honest, that's a lot worse than what I thought I was going to see in here. So like I said, the owner said he purchased this with 500 miles on it. He put almost 3,000 miles on it himself. But the thing is, he said it was running fine, no smoke. He had just done an oil change on it. And then after the oil change, it seemed like right after that, that's when it started smoking. It definitely has damage in the engine. I hope he didn't, I mean, you would think he would tell me that. I hope he didn't forget to put oil in it before he started it up. I kind of doubt it, because usually, like I said, these 660 engines will take out the top cylinder head before it takes out a piston, due to lack of oil anyways. I don't know. Certainly strange. It seems like it got very, very hot and that piston skirt expanded. Be my guess. We're putting a new piston, cylinder, all that good stuff. So should be back to non-smoking very soon. Go ahead and get the oil draining out of it. All right, so we got our new kit here. This is an OEM cylinder, as you can see. It's been cleaned up very good. It's not brand new. It's remanufactured. It's got a fresh bore and hone in there. And it's actually been bored out quite a bit, because this is 1 millimeter over. Shindy piston kit. And we got a Vertex top end gasket kit. So we got our rings, got our new piston, wrist pin, C-clips. These rings were not open when I opened the box, so obviously they haven't been checked for ring end gap. So we will check that now. Push this in. Make sure that ring's nice and even. Now the Yamaha specs call for about 0.012 to about 0.018. It's a little bit, the actual spec is 0.0118, but I don't go down that much, so we'll go to this. I can fit it in there. Feels pretty good. It's a little on the snug side, so it's actually probably very close to the spec. We'll go with 0.013, see if I can even get that in there. That I cannot. So yeah, we're right in there. Very close, but good. Maybe take a little file to it. We'll check the secondary ring. That calls for the same spec. Drop that in there. That's going to be way looser. 0.18. Second ring actually exceeds the 0.018. It's closer to 0.022. Now it is the standard, it's a little over the standard for Yamaha, but the service limit is 0.035. So we're well within the service limit. Instead of sending that back, we're going to use it. I don't think it's not off too much, and it's within spec. So we will try our oil rings, see what we're getting here. 0.014 on that one. And the same on that. I am gonna go file just a little bit off that top ring because it was pretty close. Get that filed down a little bit. We'll see what we get now. Put that in there. Put our 0.012 in again. That's better. That's much better. So should be good now. We can go ahead and start assembling our piston. Assemble our oil rings first. Just like that. Our second ring. And our top ring. Alright, now we do want to clock these. Our manual is telling us to offset the rings just like this. The arrow faces the exhaust on this, so the upper ring we want to bring right there where I have T for top. This right here is the oil lower ring. So you can see oil lowers down there. Our second ring wants to live right there. Oil upper ring will be right there. Now this stuff's probably going to move when you put it in, but we'll just make sure we get it close, and then when we get it in the machine, we'll recheck our positions. I always like to throw one of the C-clips in first, and then the other on the machine. Make sure it's locked into place. Take a fresh wrist pin. A little oil on there. And I can just start it in that piston. Right there, ready to install. Go ahead and clean all the old gasket material off the crankcase here, and then we can go ahead and install our piston. Get it lined up, and we can push that piston pin all the way through. I recommend putting some rags back down before you put that clip in, because the last thing you want is that clip going down in the crankcase. So once we make sure it's all seated, and we're good here, go ahead and put our base gasket on. Whether you have a new cylinder or a freshly bored and honed cylinder, I always like to put a little light oil on a rag and just clean off anything, and then blow off inside all the passages as well. As you can see, a little dirty in there, not bad. I've seen much worse. You never know when something, when they machine this, if they don't clean out stuff real well, there could be shavings in here. You just never know. All right, so on the bottom of this cylinder, I'm going to take a new O-ring and install that there. A little extra sealing surface. And I'm going to take some oil, some regular engine oil, and I just like to coat that cylinder. That way it's plenty lubricated when you're pushing those new rings and stuff on. Before we push that cylinder down on here, we want to make sure both our clips are in, for sure. We want to make sure our rings are in the correct position. They did move a little bit. The oil rings stayed put, but the compression rings moved a little. So now we can go ahead and put this down on. Cylinder's plenty lubed up. We want to get it as straight as we can, so when we get it all the way on there, we don't have to twist the cylinder and it might move the piston rings. Nice. And then we'll just push that the rest of the way on. Beautiful. You can see this is pushed down all the way. We're not at top dead center anymore. So I'm just going to grab that timing chain. Get that timing chain out of there. Now push that piston back up by rotating the engine. Get it right on top dead center. Now we can come in here, get our cylinder bolts locked into place. Just gonna snug these up and I'll torque them down after. Torque these 4 main bolts down to 30 foot-pounds. Get them snugged up a little more first. All right. 30. 30. 30. And 30. Good. We'll go ahead and double check them all. Beautiful. Alright, we're going to cover this up now. Go ahead and get this stuff put away because we're going to be working on the cylinder head now. Definitely would have been easier to put this on the cylinder, the new cylinder, to begin with, but we didn't, so now we're going to go do that. Take this off. It's just this little elbow. Put a new O-ring on. Believe that's the one right there. Sure is. Right, now that I get that on that other cylinder, we can get rid of this and that. Take this head cover off. We don't need this right now. pull off all these valves. Pop that out. That one. Center one. Just rotating, make sure I don't see any bend in the valve. Burnt on that before. Looks like it was sealing nice too. And now we'll pop this one off. Telling you what, this valve spring compressor saves so much time pulling these off rather than screwing in the entire way. Just be able to push it, go, works great. Now we'll pull the exhaust valves off. Looks good. Definitely some buildup on the exhaust valves. Of course, it's been burning oil for a while, so to be expected. That one off of there. Lots of buildup. Go ahead and get these cleaned up a little. Pull out the old exhaust gaskets. So I started tearing the intake and everything off this head, and I pulled the thermostat housing out, and this is what I found. I don't know if you can see that, but it's very, very bent. Very bent. And this is stuck wide open. I don't know if you can. I don't have a new one, but I went and stole a used one off one of my Grizzly 660 engines. As you can see, it looks a little different. This one's closed up right now, so this is going to allow the engine to warm up to operating temperature, and then it'll open, where this one is stuck wide open all the time. So did that have something to do with the engine going bad? I'm not sure. It certainly didn't help things. We're going to get a good functioning thermostat on there. If you're following along this far into the video, you probably know how thermostats work, but for those of you that might not, what this does is basically this stops the coolant flow. So what happens is the coolant inside the head heats up, and it'll heat up quick instead of circulating throughout the radiator. And then when it heats up enough, this will actually open up like this one, other than this is bent, so this can't move anywhere. But it'll open up similar to that, and then it'll allow the coolant to flow in there. And that's how these things work. With this being wide open, it's not going to allow the machine to heat up as quick as a good working thermostat. But we're gonna come in here, replace the valve seals. We'll pull out the old ones. Now these valve seals feel very pliable. They're not cracked or anything. So I don't think that these were causing any issues, but we have new valve seals. We're putting new in. Same thing, exhaust, nice and pliable and no tears. As you can see, the surface cleaned up nice. This is an exhaust valve. I went ahead, cleaned out the outside anyways, but this is what it looked like before it got lapped. This is the other exhaust valve. Got a lot of burnt on engine oil on there. And as you can see, it cleaned that up nicely. Same thing to the intake. Beautiful. Last one. I always like to dip the valve stem, the end of the valve stems, into a little oil. Nice. Alright, now we gotta go clean all the crap out of there. Got everything cleaned out in there now, so we can go ahead and start assembling this cylinder head. Oil around there before our new valve seals go in. Nice. Install our valves. That one. Moving on to the intake. Getting somewhere now. There's that. All right. I want to clean up the sealant surface really good. Same thing with the bottom side of this. I use a razor blade, thin edge razor blade. Seems to work the best for me. I've used actual gasket scrapers and I just do not like them. I don't know. Alright, we can come back over here, make sure everything's cleaned off, install our new head gasket. Oh, there goes that. Get that on there. Now our cylinder head can come in. Slowly and gently line it up. Now we'll go ahead and torque these cylinder head bolts down, 27 foot-pounds for all 6 of these. Do it in a crisscross pattern. Good, we got those 4. And my big torque wrench doesn't fit down here, so we got to use a different one. Right there. And the front one. And then here, pull our timing chain out once again. Install our chain guide. Make sure that's in the groove that it goes in. Get some oil on those journals. So now we want to come back down to this hole, make sure we're on top dead center. There's that top dead center, there's some oil on it, but that's the mark. Our cam is going to go in, globe's facing down, and this notch parallel with the cylinder head. Alright, so you can see the notch right there. The oil has gone down a little bit. And now we have our cam lined up. This little dot. And that little dot. So now this engine's in time. I did end up pulling this guide back off to make it a little easier to get that cam chain on. So I'm going to sneak that down in there now. I want to make sure it's seated in the notch right here. Now we're going to use some Yamaha Bond 4 and put a thin layer on this top case. Nice thin layer, look a little something like that. That red stuff's just some assembly lube. Nice thin layer on this side as well. And now we can drop this down on gently. Now we can install all our bolts. Then we want to come in here and torque everything down to 7.2 foot-pounds. Got our timing chain tensioner, new gasket on there. Go ahead and install that. I removed the bolt right here already. Now I gotta take a very thin flat screwdriver and just crank this in. You can see the tensioners going in. This is relieving. This is pulling the spring back, the tensioner back, so there's no pressure on the timing chain guide. We can just tighten that up. Once that's tightened, we can relieve the pressure on there. If you want to make sure you're not putting too much pressure, we can go ahead and crank that in and then pull it back in. And now you know it's got the automatic tensioner on it, no more pressure than it needs to be. Then we can put this back in there. Now we can move on to our valves. Intake should be 004 to 006. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen all three of these because they all need to be adjusted. Maybe not much, but just a little bit. I'm going to set it at 5 thou. We'll tighten her up. Recheck it, make sure we're still good, which we are. Perfect. And now we'll move on to the next one. Double check. Feels good. Next. And that one tightened up on me. Double check. That's good now. Alright, we are set to 5 thousandths of an inch on all the intake. Now the exhaust should be between 6 thousandths and 8 thousandths of an inch. The exhaust is tucked way in here. Hard for me to get a camera in there and do it, so but I went ahead and did it off camera. These were both set to about 6 thousandths, a little on the tight side, within spec, but I still loosened them up, set them at 7 thousandths because that's right in the middle, so I think we're good there. Go ahead and get these exhaust caps on, new O-ring installed. Same with that one. Snug those up a little bit. New O-ring on the intake cover as well. Tighten those up. Go ahead and get our oil line back on there. Want to double check, make sure you get all your copper washers in there. Should be one on the top of this line, one on the bottom, and then down here you should be 3. One right here, one there, and one there. Once we confirm that, we'll go ahead and tighten everything up. Get that side tightened. I like to leave the top loose, just hand tight. That way I can crank the engine over and get it primed up easier, get the air bled out of there, and then once I see some oil coming through here, I'll tighten this up. We're ready for the exhaust. I'll go ahead and put some new exhaust gaskets in there. Then we can grab our head pipe that is still soaked in oil, but that will be burnt off in no time. Go ahead and get this in here. Beautiful. Got the head studs tightened up. Got this on there. Got to get our mounts going. Get our heat shield back on. Both of those tightened up. Now we can get all our coolant hoses hooked back up. Our inspection plug back in there. We better fill her up with some new oil now. Got a new oil filter pre-filled. And we'll get some fresh oil in there. We'll go ahead and top our coolant off. Obviously I don't have the carburetor on there, but I don't have a spark plug in it. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this thing over until I get some oil coming up through here, and then I can tighten her down. So it's been drained for a while now. Fresh oil, it'd probably take a minute to come up through here. There we go. Get some oil at the top of that hose, our line. Tighten that down. Now we can go ahead and throw our new plug in. need new end here. We'll pull this off. Grabbed a good one off one of my Grizzlies. Let's throw this on. Get that clicked in there. So the inside of this carburetor was actually very clean, but we're going to go ahead and put a new needle and seat in there. The seat just goes down in here. New needle will go on the float. Tighten that up. Slide that down in there. Now for our main jet, we're running a 154, which is about stock. 153.8 is stock on this. So we did go 1 millimeter over on the piston. We probably want to go to the next size up, at least on the main jet. Got the carb all back together. Unfortunately, I did not have the correct main jet to go next size up. So that's too bad. I think we're going to have to change it, but we'll get her on there. Get that carb on there, get a fuel tank on there, break the engine in a little bit, and then we'll check the plug, see how we're running, and go from there. Maybe we don't have to adjust it, but usually you go a millimeter over. Usually I go at least the next size up, but we'll see. We'll get our air box slid in here. Get our choke back on there. I'm going to throw this tank on because I just want to hear it run before I put everything else back together. Get that plugged in. Come in here and I'll turn the fuel on. It's pretty low, so we'll put it up on reserve. I'll give that a second, and then we'll fire this up for the first time. I think the fuel gauge matters, but we'll plug her in while we're waiting. Alright, that. Choke, we're in neutral. Yeah, I think we're ready. Goes. It might smoke for a minute because all that stuff, all the oil that was in, of course you can see the exhaust starting to smoke from all the oil buildup in there. I sprayed a little WD-40 on those pipes to get the nuts off a little easier. So that's why that's smoking. We're starting, we're going to open it up, clear it up in here. How she wants to run here. Beautiful, that's what we wanted to hear. I'm gonna go ahead and break this engine in outside, of course. Getting a little smoky in here, but we'll go clean her out. I'm going to call it good on this video just because it's so long right now. I'll do a part 2, get this thing back up together. We'll check the plug, make sure she's running good. If not, we'll have to go grab a different main jet. And then obviously we got to fix that rear end before we drive this thing too much. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.